All right. So Kurt, we were just talking back when we met. I was a financial advisor. This is 12 years ago, a whole different life for me. I was the one wearing the suit and you're the one wearing the shirt. So roles have swapped, so things have changed quite a bit.
I knew you when you had short hair, you were serious, now you're super cool, and I'm yeah, yeah, that was.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Let's start off with the very beginning. Where does the idea for Owlet come from? You guys were just students when you did it. Tell us a little bit about kind of the genesis story of Owlet.
For sure, yeah. So I was 23 when I started Owlet. Uh, I actually met my wife in high school. We're high school sweethearts. We'd been married for 2 years at that point, talking about starting our family. Still really young though. I remember like talking to investors. They're like, "You doing talking about kids and babies? You're like a baby yourself." Uh, but what really stuck out to me was my wife and I were visiting her cardiologist to see if it was okay for her to get pregnant. She's had 3 heart surgeries, and when she was a baby, they didn't know that she had this congenital heart defect, and so her mom ended up finding her blue, not breathing. They rushed her to the hospital and ended up doing heart surgery that saved her life. And so as we were talking to her cardiologist, they mentioned that our kids were at risk of the same thing. They'd be doing all these extra checkups. I remember just thinking, like, how would I know? How would I know if this was an issue? And sound and video monitors are great, but you kind of have to monitor the monitor to check on your baby, and they don't give you any real information. A friend of mine was working at the hospital with this technology called full oximetry. Everybody's familiar with it now. It's in all the Apple Watches and everything. But at the time, it was just in the hospital. And this little red light, it can tell how well somebody's breathing, what their oxygen levels are, what their heart rate is. I thought that's incredible. I would want to know that as a dad. And so we started to work on it. The oldest great grandbaby on the Workman side of the family passed away from SIDS. I remember always just thinking my wife would have been a SID baby had her mom not been there when she needed her. And so we started to work on it. Literally starting the garage, we all paid ourselves with pizza in Provo, Utah. It was a cool garage because our first investor had this like hot rod garage. He had all his race cars in there. It was really cool locked off. Since I say we started in a garage, it was actually really sweet. Uh, but paid ourselves in pizza. Went from trying to tinker with the idea of UIU and trying to get it off the ground to quickly becoming the number one monitor on the market, number one baby monitor. Now today, 1 in 8 babies in the United States has an Owlet sock on their foot when they sleep at night. 1 in 3 in Utah. We went from 0 to 100 million in revenue in a few years and took the company public through a SPAC for $1 billion. We've been through some FDA challenges that I think we'll talk about today. But then, rebuilt the business back to over 100 million in revenue and with a lot of really exciting opportunities ahead. And so incredible. Back up. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's get pretty. Uh, so you're talking, one out of 8 babies, 1 in 3 tons, and have used the outlet sock. 1 in 3 Utah babies. Like we're like, okay, it's Swig, Crumble, then maybe Outlet, and number three as far as the highest sanitary rate. Yeah, 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 exactly. So no, it's super impressive. So BYU being a college student, that's a huge part of your guys' original story. Tell us a little bit about what it was like starting as a college student. You guys cleaned up on a bunch of business slam competitions, and that was a lot of the early days of the funding. Tell us a little bit more about the early days.
Yeah, I kind of want to do this through comparing Owlet to the company that should have won in this space because I think it's a really interesting comparison. Our team collectively had zero experience launching products, building businesses, and at the same time, there was another company called Sproutling that there were ex Google, ex IDEO employees, really really smart people out of San Francisco. They raised $2 million before we were able to. And everybody thought that Sproutling was going to be the company that won this market. There's a professor at BYU, and I tell everybody, I'm like, college is a great time to start a business because everybody wants to help you and you don't know. So you check all of your assumptions. And I think sometimes, the older we get, the more we think we know, the less curious we are. That was our only advantage. We didn't even know it was our advantage. We always thought we were right, but we were we tested our assumptions with everything. So Nathan Furr wrote a book called Nail It, Then Scale It. And the whole thesis of his book was you got to go test and validate your assumptions with your customers. And so that's really where we started. Everything we did was tested. Everything we did, we put in front of parents before we made decisions. And that led to a lot of great outcomes. But yeah, BYU was also great. All of our patent work was free early on. We won over $200,000 in business plan competitions in the kind of college competition circuit that was equity free. And I still remember we hired a student who we paid $50 to do industrial design concepts for a sock. We wanted him to design a bunch of different, iterations of it. And he came up with like 20 or 30 different iterations. And then later we paid a firm out of San Francisco $150,000 to do the same work. Because we're like, he probably didn't know what he was doing. And I still will never forget the moment I looked at the design concepts from this Bay Area design firm, and then I set them next to the student that we paid $50. There wasn't a single unique concept. He'd explored pretty much all the ways you can attach a sock to a piece for $50. So there's a lot of advantages to just that. If you're inventing something new, nobody has an edge on it. Anyway, so one of the things we learned from our customers was that there were two things that really mattered with their product. They wanted to know Bane's heart rate and oxygen, and they wanted to know if it changed. That was it. All of our surveys came back the same. That was the top end of the Pareto list in terms of customer feedback. And this Bay Area startup, Sproutling, focused on the long tail. There's a big quantified self movement. Data was huge. Everybody wanted all the data. So they really focused on like mood of your baby and predicting sleep outcomes and all these other things that we were looking at our customer feedback. We're like, well, that seems to be lower in value, but they raised more money. They had better kind of pedigree. It was so hard for us to raise money early on. And we launched our pre-sales and we did like $50,000 in pre-sales. Couldn't send any money on the campaign. They launched their pre-sales, and in the first day, they got 1 million views on their video. And we thought, okay, we must have gotten it wrong here. Don't listen to your customers. We developed the wrong thing. All the advice was bad. But what we found out was that they spent about $1 million to drive 1 million views. Nobody bought the product. Our conversion rate was really high. On the very few views we had, a lot of people bought it. It ended up doing a fire sale to Fisher Price. Fisher Price launched the product. We pulled it off in 6 months. It just wasn't the right product for customers. And it took us a while to really get the accuracy and the quality of our product. It took us 3 years to get it to market. But we launched, and within 1 year, we were the number one selling monitor at Target. So yeah, it's a pretty cool outcome for students that had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's that obsession with the customer. I think that drives all the best startups. Aside from the product learnings and everything, customers were essential in the marketing and telling of the story and kind of the user generated content and everything. How did you best leverage that in the growth of Bella?
Yeah, I think even today, our growth is primarily driven by like our core vital sign in the business is called Net Promoter Score. How willing is our customers to recommend the product to their friends and family? That's like the most important metric that we track. And from that, we get this, I love Pareto lists. It's just like what matters the most to your customer. We work off of the customer feedback. But it started early on. We had what was called our mommy army. So we were in Utah County. We had a revolving list of 100 parents within 15 minutes driving distance that were willing to test any new concept that we had. And so if we had like a new iteration of a sock, it was somebody's full-time job to just be driving around all day and like show it to people in person, and different people would tag along from the engineering team to me, so my co-founders, to go and get that feedback. And so that was built in from the very beginning of the business. And I think that ultimately is what led to the success. So.
All right, that's awesome. Oh, so it hasn't uh, all been up and to the right. Been happy your fair shares of ups and downs. 2021 was when you guys received the FDA warning letter, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Obviously that was a very difficult time in the company's history. What do you wish that you knew now, or going into that? As a young 23-year-old founder, or very early stages of Owlet, what do you wish you knew at that time that you know now?
Yeah. Owlet's been through a unique journey because we went from 0 to 100 million in revenue, and then got punched in the face by the FDA, back to 0 literally for a quarter. And then we're now back up over 100 million in revenue. So it's kind of been like we've been through this journey twice. And the second the second time we did it was a lot harder because we worked really hard to get two FDA clearances. So in 2020, end of 2023, we got a de novo clearance from the FDA, which means first of its kind. We had to create a new product category for what we were doing with the FDA. And we got a 510(k), which showed that our sock was just as accurate as the hospital monitor. So doctors can prescribe Owlet instead of the hospital monitors. And that was a huge lift while we were trying to rebuild the business with kind of significantly limited claims in the interim before we got that clearance. Really grateful to be able to go through that process. I think it's made the company a lot stronger. Our sales are growing faster. We're monitoring more babies than ever before, and we can start to use our data to actually deliver care. But through that process, one of the things that really stood out to me was I had somebody give me advice of like, look, if the FDA trusts you, they try to help you, and if they don't trust you, they do everything they can to stop you from getting clearance. Doesn't matter what the data says. There's an element of trust that really matters there. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, we fired our consultants. We hired a new team of people who had worked at the FDA and knew these people individually. We started to listen more to that feedback, but that was a big part of the change in methodology there. We were really defensive of whether or not we needed to get a FDA clearance based on what was on the market. And I would say even still today, I'm having conversations with the FDA where we're saying, hey, our competitor Eufy monitors heart rate and oxygen, sounds alarms just like we did. They still don't have clearance and they don't have a warning letter. And there's two or three other situations like that. We went from being really defensive, like, hey, how come we're the only ones being called out here? Still have questions on that. You know, still have to win results. I'll be honest. But the switch to, okay, we got to go win the trust of the FDA. This is a really important category. And our long-term vision was always to help impact health and reduce SIDS and do all the bigger things that we want to do. And so we saw it as, let's just lean all the way into that and kind of embrace the process, embrace that aspect. Other companies haven't done that. You know, Whoop got a warning letter. They're still battling it out with the FDA. Aura's now cleared. The oxygen on my Apple Watch is not cleared by the FDA. It's a really interesting kind of gray area category. But for us, we kind of sat back at that point and we said, let's just fully embrace this. And we're now we're the only monitor that has over-the-counter clearance for continuous monitoring with alarms for pulse oximetry. We kind of paved the way through that. I want to give a big shout out to Kelvin, who runs BioUtah and is on the board of BioHive. I don't think we would have gotten through that process without their involvement, his involvement specifically, reaching out to the FDA, helping us escalate, helping make sure that we had the attention that we needed. That made all the difference for us. And so community events like this really matter. It's how we met them. It's how we met him. And they really went to bat for us. And that was another big piece of building trust. So same thing with BYU. Owlet's a product of this ecosystem. It's a product of BioHive. It's a product of BYU. It's a product of Utah. And the support we've had from the community, I think, has made a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, very cool. So kind of looking back to the early days, balancing startup, time is a constraint. The resources are a constraint. How would you have balanced the FDA in the very earliest days? Because speed is also so important in getting to market and all the advantages and learnings from customers. How would you have balanced that in the earliest days?
Yeah, I think I would have just gone head into it from the very beginning, just realizing that long term strategically we needed that. I wish I would have just embraced that and made it part of what we did. It didn't end up. Nothing about the product changed between before FDA warning letter and after. We did 6,000 pages of documentation. We did additional clinical studies. The product stayed the same, and it wasn't ultimately of all the money we spent, all the money we raised. We had the bandwidth to do it. We should have just prioritized it.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's see. This I'm gonna have to read this one here. So January, you guys released the first Big and Sleek report, drawing on data from 1.2 million babies monitored 2025 alone, with Owlet having collected data from 2.5 million babies to date. So most people think of you guys as just, baby monitor that's helping the individual, but also you guys collecting a massive amount of data. How are you guys thinking about this data? What does it mean for the future of Owlet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big part of what we believe is going to have the most impact. So one of the big projects we're working on this year is actually connecting our biometric data with health outcomes. And then that linkage is going to allow us to be really predictive with our data. the biggest problems I think that we can address, number one, SIDS is the number one cause of infant mortality. It's 40 times as common as car accident fatalities for babies, so that you never get in a car without a car seat. In fact, a nurse walks you out to the car, shows you how to install the car seat. Every fire station in the country is trained on how to install car seats to keep babies safe. There are 4,000 babies that pass away in a crib unexpectedly every year, compared to 80 that pass away from car accidents. So this is a huge problem. It's the number one cause of infant mortality. And still today, the answer is we don't know what causes it. So Owlet has, I think, the most relevant data set here. We did an early study with the University of Utah where we looked at the impact of real-time monitoring on mortality rate. We had 50,000 babies in that study. We had 0 babies pass away while being monitored, and the average would have been 50. So Owlet has, I believe we can have a huge impact here in the future, and we want to use our data for that. Tying the data with the outcomes is going to allow us to publish that. So we're working hard on that. Number two, babies get sick a lot the first few years. There's a lot of healthcare utilization, millions and millions of visits. There's an ER visit on average for every baby born. And 94% of those visits are parents trying to assess risk for their child. They just don't, most of the time it's a respiratory infection or a fever. You take your baby into the pediatrician or the ER and you're trying to decide, is this serious or not? Because babies can't actually communicate, hey, it's okay or not. It's just, they sound and they cry, right? And so we think that's a huge gap for us. We're launching a telehealth integration with our data this year where doctors will be able to actually use that data. We'll have a whole kind of rich triage data set that they can use to say, wow, this baby can stay home and continue with monitoring. Or no, this baby really needs to get in. We've had thousands of cases where we've identified risk early and those babies got care that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten them without having some of that information. So that's number two. Number three, I think, is sleep. The biggest change I went through as a new dad was, uh, being woken up every 2 hours and you're exhausted. The average parent loses, I think, in aggregate, 100 nights worth of sleep that first year. So you go from sleeping 8 hours a night to less than 5. And that sleep debt just mounts. And 50% of parents are still not sleeping through the night after 6 months. We think we can help with that. A lot of these babies can sleep through the night. Parents need relevant contextual data about how their baby is sleeping, what might be causing some of the sleep disruptions. And we have a lot of really interesting things there too. So hopefully the future is that babies don't die unexpectedly in the home. That shouldn't happen in this day and age. Parents have help at home to care for their child when they're sick, and we can get parents a little bit more sleep too.
Yeah, amazing. As we walked in today, I forgive me that our JP Morgan grant that he said that, yeah, 4 kids from Gen 1, all through the four kids, all four of them have used Owlet. That's with a third of Utah's babies having used an Owlet monitor. Not sure it's stuff like that happens all the time. Is there particular stories from customers that stick out in your mind of that are particularly meaningful, you as the founder and CEO of Owlet?
Yeah, it's probably been one of the it by far the most rewarding thing about starting Aloe is all of these stories. I still remember we were hiring a VP of operations who this is Big Dane from Soul Candy. He was like our first big hire. I took him to lunch to kind of interview him, and I didn't have a car at this point in time. Like I was walking to the train afterwards, and he's driving out in his BMW and like gives me a ride to the train station. And I'm like trying to recruit him. But he came into our office and he read all of these stories of parents who shared that Owlet helped them identify a real condition or help save their baby's life. And he was coming to the office to just kind of respectfully decline the offer. And he said, by the time I got to the top of the stairs, I realized I needed to join. And that's been true for a lot of people that work at Owlet. It's, I'm a 7 at best in terms of like business expertise, but we've been able to hire tens because of the mission. I think it's been our biggest strategic advantage. And the story that sticks out the most to me was the very first kind of like life-saving story that we had. My friend Spencer Barron at college, he lost his first baby to SIDS, and they decided to beta test Owlet. We were always testing, and so he had the monitor. And I remember he called me. He's like, "Hey, Kurt, we keep getting these red alarms, keep getting these low action alarms. Can you really help me know what's going on?" And I said, "It's probably a false alarm. There's so many bugs in the product. Like, don't worry about it." And he said, "Well, you know my history. Can you just take another look?" And I was like, "Okay, we'll take a look." So we sent it to our medical advisor. I remember he were on the call with him, and he's looking through the data, and he's like, based on what I'm seeing, this baby should be in the hospital right now. They shouldn't be up home. And so they took her to the hospital. They did an overnight study and found out that his daughter half could not regulate her breathing when she slept. She just her oxygen would tank. She had this sort of like central apnea that she couldn't regulate her breathing. Anyway, so she ended up being on oxygen for 3 years until her body, it finally was able to regulate breathing at night. And then now today, I think she's about 12 years old, healthy, happy. Just a really impactful story. That was the very first one. We've had thousands of cases in White House since we launched the brother.
That's incredible. So because especially your sister at that time, you guys were on your same startup journey together. Hi, yeah,
Yeah, he's also an entrepreneur, and yeah.
yeah, that's great. I didn't know that story. That's really cool to hear. So we're sitting here at Owlet, 0 to 100 million, back to zero, back to 100 million. What's next for Owlet? What's the future look like? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm most excited. The average age of a new parent is 27 years old. You've got like $17,000 worth of expenses. That it's just a really expensive time of life. And one of the things we want to do is we want to make Outlook more affordable and accessible. So we're working on programs to do that with insurance. We're working on getting costs down so we can make Outlook more accessible for more families. And we think by doing that, and then with all the data and features we're launching around, telehealth and sleep, I think we can get it to millions of families per year, and we can have a business that's able to help parents not just through the first 6 months of their journey, the first few years of their journey across two children, and that's I think that'll be highly impactful for new families, and also a really great business that we can build. So
Yeah, incredible. Just if I could just make one comment as an investor and hearing you talk, there's kind of two things that really stood out to me. First is how acutely you understand the problem, not just from like a qualitative standpoint, from a quantitative. You said $17,500 that it costs, and immediately I'm like, oh yeah, it does cost. And then you have these things that are making the market, you know the market so well and size of everything and kind of size of the problem that as an investor, you can't help but be excited about the opportunity that you guys have at Outlet. So thank you so much for your time and it was great to be on stage with you.
sure, appreciate it.